Hey guys, I hope you're all doing well. So today we're going to start our unit into variety of speeches, and the first kind of speech and venue we're going to talk about takes place at weddings. Now, I have a do now on the screen here. I obviously can't enforce that you write this down, so while you certainly can just keep watching and I'll guide you through the do now, if you want, I recommend you pause the video right now, look over the do now really quickly, and then resume when you're ready. So, the questions I have to ask before we start are: how many weddings have you attended, and how many different kinds of public speaking take place at a wedding? Now, obviously, you can consider this on your own, but I'll use myself as an example just to get the ball rolling. Now, how many weddings have I attended? That's a good question. I think I've probably attended. Uh, I'm gonna ballpark and say maybe 10 or so, either just under 10 or a little over 10 weddings I've attended. At the very least, ones that I can remember and ones that were significant. And obviously, as a public speaker, I know how many different kinds of public speaking take place at a wedding. There are obviously different tiny exceptions, minor little things here and there, but I think it is best to note three main examples of public speaking that take place at weddings. Now, before we actually talk about the different kinds of speeches at weddings, this is a general list of concepts we've covered throughout not marking period one, excuse me, marking period three in class. Now, admittedly, some of this stuff has been a little disjointed since we've been out for a while, and frankly, there are some things this marking period that I really wanted to cover, but I don't think we can in the interest of time. That being said, all of these skills and techniques and concepts we've covered. So moving forward, the goal is for us to make sure that we don't forget these skills, but we cumulatively embrace them and just absorb them and keep them going as we keep talking. So just because we're in a new marking period doesn't mean that these skills are meaningless now. They're still valid. It's just we have to keep moving, so I can't keep talking about all these different things as we keep going. Okay, so before we hit the first kind of speech, I think it's important to clarify. Uh, Most people think of wedding toasts at weddings for speeches. That's absolutely true. That's probably the most common kind of speech you will see or even pay attention to. But there's more than one kind, and the first and probably most important, I'm not going to say it's most entertaining, but the most important comes way before any of that. Uh, and it's officiating a wedding or giving the ceremony for a wedding. I will admit some weddings don't actually have this. If, for example, you got married at a courthouse, you don't really have an official wedding speech type thing. But let's say you were asked to officiate a wedding. How do you start planning for the speech? Most people would probably get really confused. They're like, "Oh, am I even allowed to do this?" Or, how do I do this? And honestly, planning a speech for officiating a wedding is kind of challenging. So let's get into that. Now, first off, in order to actually conduct a wedding, in order to be an officiant and conduct the ceremony, technically speaking, you have to be either a religious official or a civil servant. This is a little restrictive in terms of who can do it. You can receive temporary permission to become a civil servant in order to conduct a wedding ceremony. If your friend really wants you to do it, for example, you could receive temporary permission. It's not super common, but I definitely know people who have done that. Also, ship captains, believe it or not, can actually conduct wedding ceremonies. I don't know if any of you actually know this, but technically speaking, when you're a ship captain and you're in international waters, you are technically the highest governing body on your vessel. It is your own. It's difficult to explain, but basically, being in international waters as a ship captain means you have the authority within that area, which means you technically can conduct and officiate a wedding ceremony. Why that's the case, I'm not entirely sure. There's a law or some legal precedent that allows it to be so. If you're more curious, do some research on it. But yes, ship captains can also conduct wedding ceremonies. Now, generally speaking, when you conduct a wedding ceremony, you should be happy and a professional. I honestly don't know that many instances in which the people getting married don't want to be married, or it's a sad or somber affair. There are a couple exceptions I can think of off the top of my head, but they are super unlikely. I really don't think it's ever going to be a case where, one, you're asked to officiate a wedding, and two, you have to give a somber wedding ceremony. I really don't think that's going to be the case. Now, I will say this. In terms of wedding ceremonies and officiants, this is really tricky because, sure, a friend could ask you to officiate their wedding and conduct the ceremony casually, and you can receive temporary permission, but depending on the people attending the wedding, especially the families, you have to be really careful for temperaments and personalities, and especially belief systems. While it's a little bit of an exaggeration, I've heard some stories about people who had a lot of trouble picking a wedding officiant because some people wanted a super by-the-book religious professional or official, like a pastor or a priest or a reverend, and some people in the audience who were a little more liberal, let's say, or a little less restricted by norms, didn't really want that. They didn't want to fit in tradition. They said, "Yo, we want something a little more spiritual, a little more casual." So it's tough sometimes finding the right balance, and when that's the case, you will need to research the crowd and see what they want. Are you going to talk about Bible verses, for example, or are you going to go into the general idea of love? It's very, very tricky. Now, as far as what's in the actual wedding ceremony, the speeches generally consist of, what is marriage, or how the couple fits into that definition of marriage that you're presenting, or do they go beyond it? Now, obviously, people don't particularly love a long wedding ceremony, so don't make it too long if you find yourself in this situation or instance. If you can tell a short story, if you happen to know the bride and groom, that might be good. If you want to go over a list of qualities, that might be good. Now, the funny thing is, this is one of the most important, well, frankly, this is probably the most important speech at a wedding, but it's funny because it is probably the most important because the wedding needs it to happen, but at the same time, sometimes it doesn't need it, and sometimes it's the one people want to hear the least. Now, the next thing here is definitely more common when people think about speeches at weddings. It's probably not as common as wedding toasts. Now, most weddings have MCs. They have a master of ceremonies. Now, just to be clear, a master of ceremonies is a term and a position and a role that is in a lot of different contexts, but weddings are pretty generally known for having MCs. So a master of ceremonies is someone who guides the night's events, particularly the party at the wedding. The reception. They sometimes double as the DJ, and their obligation is to entertain the guests, but guide them through whatever activities or introductions that you need to. For example, there's going to be some wedding toasts. If they're planned wedding toasts, and most often they are planned, the master of ceremonies generally introduces them or gets everyone's attention. Sometimes people giving the toast do that, but it tends to vary. You should maintain energy, keep things going, because honestly, the wedding reception should be fun. It should be entertaining. People should be dancing. I have been to weddings where people were dancing and having a good time because the master of ceremonies was doing a great job. And then I've been to weddings where it took a little while to get things going because the MC either wasn't doing a good job, or the MC stepped out for a second, or we didn't have an MC. So again, entertaining, but guiding. And this is the one you guys probably thought of the most when I asked you to think about public speaking during a wedding. You have the actual wedding toast. Now, there is a general format for what you should do during a wedding toast. I'm not going to say this is always the same, but this is, I would say, 9 out of 10 times how a wedding toast should be given. First, you introduce yourself. Most of the time, if you are asked to give a wedding toast, most of the people know you. But honestly, depending on how many people attend the wedding, not everyone will know you. So you're going to have to introduce yourself for maybe some of the older guests, some of the more obscure guests, say, hi, my name is so-and-so, I'm the bride's brother or whatever. Now, Wedding Toast asks for a couple different things. More often than not, there is some kind of a story. Again, this is like maybe a 9 out of 10 times thing. I have seen wedding toasts that don't always need a story, but generally the best ones have stories. It's generally some story about the bride or groom, or the bride and groom, maybe how they met, or what their relationship was like, maybe what they were like as children. There are jokes usually within the story. Now, keep in mind, your toast should be entertaining. Jokes are good, but this is not a roast. I have seen speeches and toasts, oh gosh, I have seen wedding toasts that start off really good, but then they go kind of bad because the person giving the toast has a little too much fun making fun of the people they're talking about. And it becomes really uncomfortable for everyone. You don't want to do that. Please don't do that. But being joking and having a couple, barbs, as long as they're lighthearted, is totally fine. Sentiment is probably the most important part of the wedding toast. After you tell the story, after people laugh a little bit, you get really serious. You drop down the tone a little bit, you shift the mood a little bit, you're serious, not so serious that people, are shocked. You don't want something quite as drastic as, ha ha ha, and final life commitment type thing. But you want to, a wedding is both joyous, but at the same time, it is serious. It is a serious commitment that people are making, at the very least, from a legal perspective. So sentiment is really good. Get into maybe how the bride and groom are a good couple together, or how you've never seen your brother happier than with his new wife. Or maybe if you want to throw in some emotional family terms in there, like my new sister-in-law or something, or my new brother, or maybe even take up a lot, just my new brother, new sister. That's entirely up to you. Obviously, toasts are, you actually toast with your glasses at a wedding. So, direct the crowd to come back in, and you are guiding them to feel several different emotions. A wedding toast is both really enjoyable and straightforward, and at the same time, it can be really complicated because you're asked to do a lot of stuff. You're asked to tell a story, you're asked to make the audience entertained, you're asked to make the audience feel sentiment, whether it's, inspiration or love, or I don't want to say sadness, but like, the tender feelings, and you're supposed to bring it back so that people they can remember what you've said and connect it to how they should be feeling with the bride and groom. Wedding toasts are really complex on that level. So in the interest of them being complex, you want to consider length. I don't think a wedding toast needs to be more than 6 or 7 minutes. It really depends on the context, but a good wedding toast should not be overly long. I definitely think 10 minutes is a little bit too long of a toast. Now, obviously, if you read the crowd and you're like, man, they're really into it, maybe you could decide, maybe 10 minutes is good. But I don't recommend 10 minutes. I think 5 or 6 minutes is a good ballpark. Wedding toast should not be super long. Okay, so here's your assignment for this lesson. By Wednesday in Classroom, I'm going to open up an assignment link. You're going to take a link, preferably from YouTube, although if you want to pull something up on Netflix, I suppose I could check it out, for a wedding toast. It can be either real or fictional. I really recommend you pick one that's fictional from a show or something. Honestly, I think it'd be good if you remember it from something you have seen. Now, if there is something on YouTube that you really, really like or really think is bad and you want to talk about, totally fine. Send me that link. But either way, you're sending me some kind of wedding toast link for me to watch. And you're going to do 2 things. You're going to give me 3 things that work really well in the speech and 3 things that don't work really well and maybe they could fix. So again, let's call this an exit ticket. This assignment is due by Wednesday, and then on Thursday we're going to have the next lesson for the next variety of speech we're going to talk about this unit. Okay, thanks.